In America, the idea that if you work hard, you will become financially successful is a myth. There are millions of Americans who work incredibly hard all of their lives and end up in poverty at the end. My name is Kimberly Graham. I am running for United States Senate. I'm a mom to an amazing son. My dad is one of 15 kids from a family here in central Iowa. My mom was a teenager when she dropped out of high school to have me. I've been standing up and fighting for Iowans in juvenile court for the last 20 years. I believe that we need people in the United States Senate who are one of us. There's a huge influence of corporate money in politics. Once these politicians accept their money and get into office, lobbyists from those industries come knocking on their office doors. They're writing legislation that is going to benefit their bottom line. It's going to put profits over people. One good example is that we have far too high of nitrate levels here in our drinking water. It's even been documented that we have increased rates of thyroid cancer because of that. We still have a system where our schools are funded with local property taxes. Your property value should not determine the funding available for your education. There should not be even one Iowan who does not have health care, who cannot get universal child care that they can actually afford. There should be no elder Iowans living in poverty. As someone who's been a single mom since my son was 7 years old and trying to pay everything on my own, as someone still in debt from my education, who has put off going to the doctor, I understand better than the other candidates running for this office what it is like to try to make it financially in 2020 as a working person, to not ever be able to get substantially ahead. Until we get more people like me and you into positions of power, none of this is going to change. We can transform Iowa. Iowa could be a recreational destination in this country. If I don't win, I'm concerned that we won't help small and medium farmers to transition to sustainable and regenerative agriculture. We're never going to see universal childcare, and that childcare will continue to be something that will financially break people. Every Iowan deserves to lead a life of health and dignity. It's time to invest in a United States Senator who wants to invest in you. Vote today. Go to KimberlyForIowa.com. Put people over profits.
If not now, then when? When your children grow up, will you pass it to them? Tell them you were scared to stand up back then. If not now, then when? Is it too much to ask for a life free of hate? A place to call home and a dignified wage? Who here will fight for the world we deserve? 'Cause we are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for. If not us, then who will take the bold steps that we have to? When the difference will be what we do or don't do. If not us, then who? Is it too much to ask for a life free of hate? A place to call home and a dignified wage? Who here will fight for the world we deserve? 'Cause we are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for. If not now, then when? You're just gonna sit on the side while it happens again. After so many years of talking, my friend. If not now, then when? And who here among us will stand up and fight? Organize bravely and walk out on strike? We know that actions speak louder than words, and we are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Hey, Jeff.
He's on mute.
You're muted. We need a sign on a stick. We've always said we need a sign on a stick.
There he is.
Oh, there you go. Well, now we can hear you. That was
okay.
My fault.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kimberly. I didn't hit the right button.
No, you're fine.
I was on here about 5 minutes early, so.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We're fine. We're gonna actually record this and then stream it, and then show it later. So we're not on any certain time, time crunch. But but we'll try to keep this to probably like 45 minutes or so of a discussion or something like that. We could go a little bit longer if we, if we want to or need to. We'll have a pause so we can cut this and then start over. I think you learn. I feel like I've become being like on TV, right? Because I'm always on Zoom constantly. Anyway, okay. So welcome, everyone. I'm Kimberly Graham, candidate for United States Senate, and we are here tonight in another one of our series of specialty forums where we are here to talk tonight about union and labor issues. This is a particularly kind of near and dear to me topic because my dad was a lifelong pile drivers union member. My mom was in Communication Workers of America all of her career, retired from being a clerk at the phone company. My son's father is an IBEW electrician. My grandfather was in the Carpenters Union. My stepdad was a firefighter in 5 years as an American Airlines flight attendant and volunteer union organizer. Union member. I know how important unions are to our middle class, to having a strong middle class, and so this is just a topic that it is just very, very, very important to me. We need more unions. We need stronger unions. We need to unionize traditionally female areas of work, like daycare workers, like servers, like paraeducators, who unfortunately are only occasionally unionized, but not very often, and get paid very poorly for the work they do. So anyway, this is just a great topic. So I'm just going to go around and have you all. Ryan, would you start us off and just introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Ryan. I'm living in Iowa City. I am a graduate of the University of Iowa, where I now work as a labor organizer for SEIU, and I'm coming off of a higher ed campaign at the University of Iowa, the Faculty Forward campaign. So, I come from outside of Detroit, from a union, household. Not everyone was able to be union. My father is now a Teamster. And I've sort of entered the labor movement in the last few years, so I'm happy to join and happy to be here.
Thanks, awesome. Riley, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sorry, I was muted. So I also am a recent graduate of the University of Iowa. I graduated just this last December. I've lived in Iowa most of my life. I moved here in City Fund, and I also sort of a recent addition to the labor movement. What got me, I'd say, radicalized or activated was the very same Faculty Forward campaign that he was a part of. Actually, seeing them active on campus while I attended university was very instrumental in getting me exposed to sort of the struggles that even your teachers, people that in your day-to-day life are going through and fighting for, and inspired me to become a labor organizer too. So I'm actually organizing. I'll have a short story later about some organizing that's going on in my own workplace. And then I also have been accepted to a similar campaign that Ryan was working on with SEIU, but in Boston. So I'll be moving to Boston to organize when the
people who, live in your district and don't know, tell us who you are.
Well, I'll be glad to. Thank you, Kimberly. My name's Jeff Kurtz. I was a locomotive engineer for 40 years.
Oh. That's called rural internet syndrome, I think. RIS. Jeff, you're frozen. Here, let me. There we go.
Oh.
You were frozen up there for a little bit.
Well, that's probably not a bad thing. Okay. Yeah, and so I was a union officer most of my career, and for the last 10 years of my career, I was head of our LET, Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Train. We're part of the Teamsters Rail Conference, and I was also president of our local for 8 years too. I retired in 2014, December of 2014, and as I tell people, I incurred a massive headache. That's probably similar to your story too, Kimberly.
Yeah.
But so I entered the primary, won the general election in 2018. Just completing my first term in office here in House District 83, Fort Madison, Keokuk, most of Lee County.
Awesome. Cool. Well, there's, as we all know, there's like a million topics we could discuss when we talk about labor and unions. I'd really like you guys dealing with, or that you see. I mean, we know in the state, undone, but on a federal level, what issues are there?
I know I discussed this with you before, but I'm working on an initiative right now with a guy by the name of Bill Moyer, and as I tell people, it's not that Bill Moyer. Bill is the head of the Backbone campaign. He's out of Seattle, Washington, and we're working on a project called Solutionary Rail. And what we'll do is decarbonize the transportation system and electrify the rail system. You can go to solutionaryrail.org, read all about it. Right now, we're putting together a webinar marrying transportation with sustainable agriculture. We'll probably have that done in the next week or so. So that's what I'm doing on the federal level. I'm working for justice for railroaders right now because of what's happened during the current pandemic. The railroads, the rail carriers have seen fit to make these guys' lives more miserable than they were. They actually loosened safety regulations for the railroads and are going to work these guys more hours and more frequently, putting them in danger, their families in danger, and anybody that happens to be in the along the right-of-way in.
I've been told that when we're recording clean, but anyway. Yeah, but I was just saying that I've been told to actually record whatever was said. I'm not sure how that works, but anyway, it's all right. All good. Well, cool. Riley, what's going on with you? What are you working on in regards to unions and labor?
Hey, Jeff, you said you're part of the Teamsters, so you're going to want to hear about this. So a little bit of a story that's sort of relevant to organizing within the frameworks of downtown, the community, Pullman line cook there. So I've been a line cook there on and off for a couple of years. I took a break to work with the Bernie Sanders campaign, but then I'm back. And so as you know, there were a lot of restrictions placed on bars and workplaces. So the past few weeks, per those state guidelines, we had a series of measures that we had to comply with. For example, we weren't letting people into the restaurant. You had to order either takeout or delivery only. They were distributing masks to everyone. So for a while there, like, they were taking a lot of adequate steps to make sure that we were still walking this tightrope where, like, we kept the lights on in the restaurant and paid the overhead, but keeping all of the employees safe. With the announced Kimberly that she would be reopening all of the state's service workplaces and sort of loosening those restrictions, we have, as a diner, has decided to begin allowing people back into the restaurant. And this was a top-down decision that we were not asked if we're comfortable with that. It's incredibly unsafe, as you know. Like, it's not we're going to be reopening right in the midst of, like, the peak of our infections. And there's been a lot of talk among, like, the rank and file at my work that resist this. So it really illustrates that there is sort of a top-down power dynamic in the restaurant and in, most workplaces like that, where the workers don't really have a say, confront unsafe work conditions because their boss tells them to. So that's why I would say, the conclusion that I reached was that a union would be the surefire way to sort of push back against this top-down model of decision-making and sort of bring the workers' voices into that model. It would allow us to sort of collectively have the power to keep ourselves safe during this outbreak. And so what we've been doing, we've been in touch with the Teamsters. Jeff, we've been in touch with Jesse Case. The Teamsters have been trying to help Iowa City restaurant and, like, bar and diner workers to organize to demand, like, a higher industry standard, which I think is pretty great because that's, as we all know, that's a pretty under-organized industry. It's very hard to penetrate that lack of organization and that just the sheer polarity of, like, those top-down structures. So that's kind of the work I've been involved in, and so I'm really glad to see, that there are candidates running for local office and state office who are more pro-union and who can be, like, allies of labor and sort of help avoid these situations where we're being forced to sort of either organize or get sick, really.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep, absolutely. There's just so many federal policies too that I'm very interested in changing, and then just things like other associated things like who's on the National Labor Relations Board, which then affects things that happen. What if we had U.S. senators in there like me who were not going to confirm people to that board who, did not have a demonstrated history of being pro-labor? I mean, it's kind of like, it's just upside down world in all the cabinet agencies that were all the people who are appointed to lead cabinet agencies like Betsy DeVos, Department of Education, spent her career trying to dismantle public education in Michigan. Like, we're appointing people that have a history of doing the opposite of whatever that agency is supposed to be doing. So, that obviously can change even if we don't flip the presidency, which of course, I hope we do, but even if we don't, if we can take back the United States Senate, then we will have a good, assurance that nothing is going to, if we've still got a Democratic House and we have a Democratic Senate, then we're going to be in better shape as far as at least being able to prevent some things from happening, I hope. Yeah. Ryan, what are you doing? What's the top of your mind?
I guess so. In this last year, I've been doing a lot of work with the University of Iowa, whether it's, on the academic side or the hospital side, and sort of seeing firsthand what the gutting of public sector unions in Iowa really means on the ground. Mm-hmm. And it really means, especially with Supreme Court cases like Janus that have really hurt a lot of unions in membership and resources. There's a landscape in Iowa that is, I think, representative of the larger national field. Is that where we used to have protections for workers in the courts and recognition for a union and having a collective bargaining agreement that was in line with how powerful their union was. We're losing those protections, and we're seeing more of a, I think as far as labor is like against the wall in a lot of ways, there's also this resurgent labor movement among gig workers, among educators, among healthcare workers, that are really taking collective action and proving that, you don't really need a contract to be powerful, but it definitely helps to have the protections of the courts and the government. But, I think to Riley's point, as a millennial myself, many of us are working either contract jobs, gig jobs, where there's not a union presence. Many young people don't really know a lot of the history of the labor movement. It's not really in their lives. So, I'm curious now how this time of COVID-19, of working remotely, has really, I think, unleashed a spark in the labor movement to name where we've gone wrong and to name how we can move forward. I think unions is the answer. I think unions must be, transformed in a way that is ready to receive this moment too. But for a lot of people that are hurting now, I think it's becoming more and more clear that the ruling class doesn't want workers to have power collectively. Mm-hmm. But this is kind of our moment, like any, to take this and to build a real resistance where, our biggest power comes from our labor most often.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. How do we do that? Like, how do we, especially because we're just a little bit like doing organizing with one hand tied behind our backs, since oftentimes organizing is done face to face, right? Ideally. Mm-hmm. How do we go about that? How do we, like I was just this afternoon, I was talking to a group of paraeducators, said that they actually were. And so just to give you some context, these are mostly women who become paraeducators. Most do not have, most have either a high school diploma or maybe a 2-year associate degree. I mean, occasionally there's one that has a bachelor's degree, but that seems to not be prevalent. They are paid somewhere, I think they told me $14.09 an hour to basically be helping children and caring for children and helping teach children in the classroom. But they don't get the kind of benefits that teachers get. For example, they have to pay like they have to pay something even for single person insurance for just them. Whereas the teachers, at least what they conveyed to me was the teachers for a single person that is paid, like that's paid by the state, by the funding for the teacher's salary. That's in that salary. I mean, these are people that are making like $15,000 a year to care for children and teach children. And they met me that they actually, because I said, well, I think you should all unionize. And they said, well, we did that. And we actually never got a pay raise. I mean, so we were paying $26 a month for our union dues, and we never got a pay raise. And when they would try to negotiate one for us or with us, just to the ones that ultimately will approve, a pay increase, would just say, we just don't have the money. We just don't have the money. Now, obviously, I wasn't any part of that negotiation, so I have no idea whether we just don't have the money was accurate or not at all accurate. I have no idea whatsoever. But, they expressed some frustration about that. So, I still think that you probably have better chances if you are organized into a union. But I don't know if this is kind of any kind of a thing you were alluding to. I don't remember if it was Ryan or Riley that was alluding to this when you said we have to like restructure unions to meet this moment. Yeah, that, maybe especially for younger workers and especially for mostly female workforces, which are a lot of these like childcare workers. We're going to lose a third to a half of our childcare spots through this pandemic, and we may never get them back. I was just talking to a childcare advocacy group yesterday. And again, this is an entire group of people doing critically important work, caring for children, toddlers, infants, right? And they're just left to twist in the wind in the good old US of A. Like, we're not investing in that service. We're not subsidizing it at the level we need to. So, I mean, I guess I'm saying this is like a larger, this is a larger systemic problem. I know this is not news to any of us four here, that we're just as a country failing to invest in the majority. We're failing to invest in the majority on various levels in various different ways. So, I mean, my question, I guess, is, how do we start organizing more?
Kimberly?
More workers, yeah.
Yeah, and the part about not having money, this really bothers me because the last couple of years, according to the Republicans, we've run fantastic surpluses in this state. And to say that we don't have money to pay these people is just wrong. We don't have the money. It's not going to the right places. We're some of the legislation I've been involved in has just been mind-boggling, and it's so frustrating. I never thought that I'd be able to chew a railroad spike in half, but there were times in committee meetings that I think I could have done it. But I think part of the answer to that, and it's more of a long-term thing, is that you do have to unionize, but when you unionize, you have to realize you have to be political too. And people don't want to hear that, but I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. And there's no way to get around it, because I'm trying to think who said this quote, but it goes something like, if you don't vote, that's fine, because somebody else will vote for you and give you what you don't want. And that's where we are. I think people have to look at the politics of this along with contract negotiations and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I told the group I was talking to today, is I said, look, the demographics are on our side. Ultimately, this country is getting younger and browner, and the younger and browner folks are not going to stand for this BS much longer. And when they get old enough to vote, and we've got more of them engaged, which we got to make sure we get those people politically engaged who are now coming up on 18, 19, 20 years old. They're not going to keep voting these people in. who are allowing all of this nonsense to go on and failing to invest in people. But again, as you just said, Jeff, that's not going to be like tomorrow. Suddenly it's all going to change. It's going to take, years of election cycles. But, people just don't, a lot of it is, it's on the ground, boots on the ground organizing or Zoom organizing. But then a lot of it is, like you said, getting people politically engaged and realizing the extent of when you have lobbyists for corporations donating to candidates, it is absolutely ridiculous to think that those candidates are going to get into office and not take the call of the person that maxed out donated to their campaign, and that they're not going to have their ear. They're going to. And, that's something that, I've said this publicly, it's not any big, secret, but that's one of the frustrating things about this particular U.S. Senate race that I'm in is that, I contacted the DSCC for 3 weeks, and I was the only announced candidate. And I emailed them after about a week when nobody was returning my calls. I literally said, I'm the only announced candidate for United States Senate in Iowa. Iowa, Joni Ernst, we want to get her out of there. And literally, and then I started emailing them. And that was last May. And to this day, nobody has returned a call or email from me at the DSCC, even to just say, we've already picked our candidate and it's not you. Not even
coming up to the end of your first term, you probably still won't hear anybody either, hear from anybody. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. I think you touched on it. We've got to get big money out of politics.
And it's a sticky wicket, Jeff, and you know this, and I know you've run up against this yourself, that being a Democrat, it's very, very fine line, because guess what? Some of the people keeping us stuck here are Democrats. And fellow Democrats don't want to hear that a lot of time. They think, don't attack other Democrats. Look, honey, I'm not attacking somebody else. I'm just giving you the facts. Candidate X has taken X dollars in corporate lobby money. You should know that. If that's okay with you, then vote for that person. If it's not, at least now you know what you're doing. I don't see that as an attack. Attacks, I think, are things that are baseless or about someone's character, or you know what I mean. But I think there's definitely, and I'm seeing it myself, and I know you've seen it, Jeff, there's something, and I think it is not unique to Iowa, but I think it's unique to a small number of states. If you attack someone else point out they're taking corporate lobby money or corporate PAC money in New York or California, that's just par for the course. If you do it in Iowa, a lot of Democrats will talk you down for that. We'll say, oh, you shouldn't mention that. You shouldn't mention that. You're pitting, party members against each other. You should not do that. Well, if we don't do that, then we get what we have gotten. We keep getting the same. I haven't noticed our last two senatorial elections. I didn't notice that the Democrats won. and those were DSCC backed candidates with a lot of corporate power behind them, and they didn't win. And so,
and even if they did win, what would they do for the labor movement?
Oh, right. I don't know. Hopefully they wouldn't have voted against labor, but I don't know that they would have been standing up and loudly advocating and being really strongly pro-union and moving the union movement forward. I truly don't believe that even a more center or moderate whatever Democrat is going to, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm willing to hear I'm wrong, is going to hurt the labor movement, but I don't think they're going to be moving it forward, like a more progressive candidate would be wanting to do.
Well, the first 2 years of the Obama administration, we had a veto-proof Senate, we had the House, we had the presidency. What labor bills did we move? Did we get rid of right to work? Did we get card check? No. And that's, it didn't, he didn't do anything to hurt us, but he didn't do a heck of a lot to help us either.
Right.
And I still think I personally will not take money from anybody who I think is going to ask for something that I'm not going to be willing to do, because
Right.
I do not want to be beholden. So I'm never going to be probably in a leadership position, because I will never raise that much money, probably.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But I think it goes to show there's been a shift. I think that with New Labor and the sort of new face of the Democratic Party after, say like the 90s, the same thing happened in the UK, or we have to shift to the center in order to get the votes. And I think along the way I think this translates a lot into maybe some existing unions as the sort of managerial class of, we'll talk with the party officials to get this done. But, if you think about when the U.S., for instance, had its most powerful labor movement, it was, say, in the 30s when, folks walked off the job if they weren't getting what they wanted. And I think over the past 4 decades or so, the working class has been disarmed of its most powerful tool, which is the strike. And I think in its stead, there have been a lot of compromises that, frankly, managers and friends of managers have made with politicians, with big business. And really, that won't change until the working class are able to wield all the tools in their belts to be able to take on, the corporatization of this country, of, all the evils that we face, from xenophobia to racism to all of our evils that we carry. And I think this is about where's the spark going to come? How is this going to change? I think things are changing, and we don't see it in the spotlight. That, for instance, like Amazon and Instacart and other workers walked off the job because of the conditions that they're facing. And this is the future of labor, and the future, and return to the past too, of when labor was strong.
Kimberly,
Yeah.
could I ask your other two panelists, have you been in contact with the University of Iowa Labor Center?
I have before. They provided us with a lot of resources that were incredibly useful. For example, they were giving out booklets that were up to date Iowa workers' rights, workplace rights, and they would keep an up-to-date record on the things that you're allowed to do. For example, in the state of Iowa, even though it's a right-to-work state, you are federally protected if you are to sort of engage in unionizing activities, in the sense that you can't be fired for doing those things or like intimidated. So you do have at least a few baseline protections. And the Labor Center was really useful in helping me and my coworkers sort of understand the landscape of the playing field and sort of the tools that we did have, and the things that we were sort of prohibited from doing, like where our limits were, like where we had to sort of get creative. So the Labor Center is a great tool. There was a long fight at the University of Iowa to keep it, that I was sort of on the peripheral of, or at least it was happening while I attended. But I mean, it just honestly just goes to show that like they're willing to axe the Labor Center because it's useful for workers. It's useful for, organizing faculty at the time. So I think to the point that you need to politicize the working class and get them in this movement is incredibly true, because if they're not engaging in the fight and like unionizing and organizing and getting back at the erosion of the working class's power, their power, they're just going to let it happen, unopposed, because they're trying to erode our power as it is. They were already trying to axe the Labor Center. So I think that's an incredibly good point, is that that's sort of the future of the working class, is politicizing them.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, have you been in contact with them?
Oh, most definitely. And I know some good folks at the Labor Center.
Yeah. Another issue, we're not related to what we were just talking about. Well, in that it's labor's and union, but if any of you know, and I don't know if Jeff might know more about, just because this is more of a, for our elder brothers and sisters, about pensions and the whole issue that's going on with, especially the now I'm blanking on it. The
Hypers?
No, is it Great Lakes? The Great Lakes pension?
Yeah.
Yeah. That there's an issue that's basically out of money, or it's going to be out of money like in just a few more years because, yeah. I mean, that's something that, and I've been asked about that a few times. I mean, that just is such a no-brainer to me. Look, if we can bail out auto companies and Wall Street and banks, and then the feds need to pony up the money and make sure that every union worker who paid into their damn pension all their lives, gets that pension. I mean, that was something they were promised. It's a significant benefit. And the whole notion of letting people end up retiring and all of a sudden their pension that was going to be probably in most cases 3/4 of their household income, like Social Security might make up, a quarter of that, is just absolutely appalling to me. And I don't really hear enough, I don't hear enough people talking about that, enough, people running for office talking about that issue. I realize it's more that particular thing, maybe more of a feds issue, but.
Yeah. And while we run into that in the state of Iowa with Hypers, we keep hearing from the other side, we will never touch Hypers, while they're putting their greasy hands all over it. A pension, and believe me, I retired from the railroad approximately 6 years ago. I've got a great pension, and I was doing really well before I even ran for office, and I thought, God, I can't imagine why anybody that works their whole life doesn't have something like this. Your other two panelists, I would love to see them have some, and they should have something like this. If they've worked all their lives, they're pretty well used up when you get to be my age, and they should be able to enjoy themselves and their if they decide to go the route that I have, their kids and their grandkids.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's again a larger issue too, a more macro issue that, why do we as a nation accept that we're just going to have a certain large percentage of elders living in poverty, which like if you worked jobs that either maybe you worked a series of part-time or full-time jobs, but they didn't have any pension attached with them or any kind of retirement plan. And if you earned so little that you literally had enough money to pay your rent, your food, your necessities, and you didn't have a bunch of extra money to put into a 401k like somebody who's, making a lot more money does. We think somehow that's okay, that when you can no longer work and you're 65 or 70 or 75, that you should be able to survive on like $1,200 a month or $1,500 a month. And then by the way, our healthcare system is so screwed up that you also have to pay your supplement Part B and your prescription this and that, and then you got the donut hole and you can't get your prescription because of this and the that and the yada yada. It's like, it's absolutely absurd, and it's all set up to benefit these giant corporations who are just raking in money, on the backs of these people who've worked all their lives, and now are supposed to live on $1,200 or $1,500 a month. And I'm my little rant here, I'm sick and tired of people trying to claim that somehow if you worked really hard, by the way, here's a little spoiler for our video that's coming out tomorrow. So we have a new campaign video coming out tomorrow, and this is something I actually say in that video. The idea that if you work really hard your whole life, that you will be financially successful, like that it's somehow inevitable, is a complete myth. And it is one that we so tightly cling to in this country. Even those who live in poverty cling to it. to the point that we somehow, who are not wealthy, think that we think we have somehow failed. Like, if only we worked harder, if only we were somehow better or smarter, then we wouldn't be poor or we wouldn't be lower middle class. And that is just not true. And, so part of getting people politically engaged and all of that, I believe, is talking very clearly and explicitly about money and how money and salary and income is power. It can give you power. It can give you choices. It can give you options. And when we don't talk about money, when we sort of money, we'll talk about sex in this country. We'll talk about politics in this country. We'll talk about religion in this country. Very few people will actually talk about money, like dollars and cents. We somehow think we shouldn't talk about that. Well, not talking about money, I think, just benefits those who have more of it than they can ever spend. That's who that benefits. So anyway, that's my rant about that. I digress. Yes, Riley.
Actually, I had noticed something about what Jeff said is on the subject of pensions. I've been sort of pushing for sort of a recognition of like the cross-generational similarity that we have there, because, the older generations who have maybe had union jobs back before, like Ryan said, the 80s and 90s, where it was like eroded for decades. And then, come to find when they're ready to retire that sort of the managerial class has stuck their hands in the cookie jar. And now there's no money left. So they've worked and contributed a portion of their own income that they generated with their own labor for years and years and years, and then it's just gone. That is the same exact financial scenario as a worker like myself who has surrendered a portion of their a large portion of their future income in the form of student loan debt that we will have to work and spend an insurmountable, for me, chunk of our income to try to pay this thing off, only to perhaps not even make a dent in it because the interest rates are so high. It's the same thing. We should be working together across the generational divide on both of those issues. And that's really where like working class power comes from, is like fighting together on those issues that you share, because just by virtue of being a working person, you have been robbed by one facet of this sort of boss class or this owner class.
Yeah. I mean, and why? So, and I don't know if you all know my student loan story, but I'm a first generation college student. I put myself through college and law school, usually working 2 or 3 jobs at a time until I became a flight attendant. Then I worked every weekend, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I went to school during the week for years. And then I went to law school. I went to Drake, which is a super, super expensive private law school. And when I left law school, I had $80,000 in student loan debt. And, that number may startle you, but if that number startles you, it's a good thing you're sitting down. So after 20 years of making on-time payments for roughly 20 years under an income-based payment system. So in other words, the actual payment I should have paid to pay them off in like 10 years was over like around $1,000 a month or something in that neighborhood. I never made the kind of income to be able to pay that monthly payment. So they say, oh, that's okay. We'll just enter you into an income-based repayment program, so you won't default. Tell us what your income was for this year. We'll give you your payment, and here's your payment. And you renew that every year, so it's based on the income you made the year before. So for 20 years, roughly, I've made on-time payments between like $250 to $400 a month for 20 years. I now owe $240,000 in student loan debt. Because when you make income-based repayments, you don't even pay the interest. Mm-hmm. And so the interest accrues and capitalizes and gets added to your principal, and your principal grows, and then the new interest gets added to that principal, and that grows, and then here you are. And so, yeah, you're not going to find anybody who's going to like work harder for student loan debt forgiveness. But the thing about student loan debt forgiveness is, we have an educational uphill battle to do with the greater public about that, because on a couple of fronts. One is that unless you are the one in debt, or like your adult child or your adult grandchild or somebody that has told you about their student loan debt, this is one of those things. When I say we need to talk about money, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And that is why I use my real numbers, and I tell people this story a lot. Because I say, look, you're probably shocked, but what you don't know is I am sure you know someone in a similar boat to me, but you don't know because they're never going to tell you, because they're ashamed. Why are they ashamed? They're ashamed because we buy this myth that if only you worked hard enough, Kimberly, you wouldn't be $240,000 in debt, right? And so we feel like, I'm an exception. I guess I just didn't work hard enough. No, the system truly, really was rigged against you if you ended up that way. And it started with us not having debt-free college or trade school. Like, you shouldn't be able to go to college, especially to a public college, and leave there with a penny of debt. That shouldn't be possible. Why would you do that? That's like you're going to get education to make a better life, but then you're leaving saddled with $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 in debt? That absolutely defies logic. So we have to work on that. We have to get the student loan debt forgiveness done. And believe me, I kind of feel this way myself a little bit. So I understand the feelings of people who say, look, you knew what you were doing when you took out that student loan. You signed the contract. You got to pay it back. And to them, I actually say, you know what? I actually agree with you. And I have no problem actually paying back my $80,000. I do have a problem paying back my $240,000 because I didn't borrow $240,000. So, but all that aside, especially now with this pandemic, a forgiveness of student loan debt would be such a boost to the economy at a time when we desperately need it. So, if we can switch and get at least a Democratic Senate, hopefully a Democratic president here in late 2020, early 2021, after that election, maybe we'll have the momentum, given how crappy the economy is going to just be in shambles. Maybe that's something that we can actually get done, because there's been numerous studies done before the pandemic that by economists, not just by people just musing, but like actual studies that showed what a burst to the economy it would be. It would be great for the economy if the student loan debt was all forgiven, because there are people putting off everything from going out to dinner, to buying a car, to having a child, to buying a house, who legitimately are not doing those things because they are saddled with so much student loan debt. And so that money would be freed to be spent in another way, that money that, would have gone or could have gone to student loan debt. So I agree with you totally. I mean, yeah. And how did that happen? A lot of people think that student loan companies like Sallie Mae, Navient are governmental agencies. And I thought that myself for a long time. And then I finally learned, oh, no, those are private corporations. And they are allowed, somehow Congress thinks it's okay, they're allowed to do this. They're allowed to charge interest on interest on interest on interest, which just is ridiculous. And it all comes back to making investments in people, in working people in this country. Because those people that are taking out student loans, they're typically from lower income or lower middle income families. And also, if we don't ever do any student loan forgiveness, who that hurts actually disproportionately a lot are Black and brown people who take out a disproportionately large amount of student loans because their parents probably didn't have the money in a lot of cases to pay for their education. And so they're almost, across the board taking out student loans. So, yeah. So now we just got to get elected.
Kimberly, to get back to labor, what do you have a labor policy then? Something that you could summarize for us?
Well, yeah, it's on the website. So there's actually many different, they're all listed there. I think it said either labor and unions or unions labor. And, everything from, I would like to get that, so-called right to work, federal ban on that. That's one of my top priorities. The things you already mentioned, Jeff, card check, the Workplace Democracy Act that Senator Sanders, that was part of his platform. Getting the right people on the National Labor Relations Board, making sure that those pensions receive federal funds if necessary to make sure that they are able to pay out the pension amounts that they were supposed to pay, that they were planned to pay. I think that's anything else. What am I missing?
No, I think, well, there's a lot that needs to go into this. But, and for what it's worth, you got my official endorsement too, Kimberly. So.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. So anything else? Any words of wisdom or hopefulness or hopelessness, Ryan and Riley?
Ryan, you can go first.
Well, I'm also saddled with the student loan debt, and I think the words pension and retirement to our generation are just not in our vocabulary.
And Ryan, I'm 55 years old and I have that amount of debt. I mean, I don't have any time left to save for retirement. I feel you.
It's just unjust. But, I think there are more ties, like our debt, how we can organize around our debt and I remain hopeful that there will come a time where the stress of how much debt we have all incurred and how much work we've put into such empty ends will, bring us together and to a brighter day.
I think so too. Thanks, Ryan. Riley?
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you to Jeff Kurtz and the Teamsters, as well as to SEIU. As much as unions have been eroded over the past few decades, it's the ones that are still there and the ones that are sort of reaching out and helping to organize the working class that are really the foundation for this resurgence that we're seeing. Because it doesn't really matter if you're fed up at your job or if you're just tired of being kicked around by student loan debt sharks. If an institution that's been fighting for people like you, like a working person, then I don't think this resurgence would have even been possible. So all we have to do is, keep the fight and sort of grab the torch, keep running.
Exactly. And, I'm very glad that at some point in this particular run for the presidency that Senator Sanders started saying, "Not me, us." I don't know if that was very, very thoughtful or just kind of happened, but I'm glad it did, because that's just so important for us to remember and realize that I understand people being, devastated that Senator Sanders is not going to be the president because of all these wonderful progressive policies that he would have led the fight to get. But he's right. It was never, ever, ever about him. And so we all have to remember that and refuse to drop the torch, no matter how bleak things may seem from time to time. So, yep. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you all being here. If you have any questions, comments, or anyone seeing this when we are releasing it, you can always reach me at Kimberly at KimberlyForIowa.com, Kimberly at KimberlyForIowa.com. Much to the chagrin of my staff, I always reply to emails personally. They would like me doing other things sometimes, but I figure, to me, the number one job of a U.S. Senator is to listen to people. If you're not listening, then I don't know how you know what they really need to go fight for so they can lead lives of health and dignity. So I've made it a really big point to be very accessible to anyone who ever wants to talk to me. So thank you so much, you guys, and we'll see you hopefully in person someday, sooner than later. Bye. Bye, Jeff. Bye, Ryan. Bye, Riley.
Bye.
Thank you, Kimberly.